Light woods are everywhere right now. White oak, maple, ash, birch, anything with that clean, calm, natural look. In fact, the National Kitchen and Bath Association 2026 report says that wood grain cabinets are outpacing painted cabinets at 59%, and white oak was the most popular wood type at 51%. So it stands to reason that homeowners these days are also looking for those lighter colored woods in furniture. Not only that, they're favoring muted finishes that maintain the natural look of the wood with that sort of barely finished appearance. The problem is, woodworkers know that as soon as you put some kind of finish on those lighter color woods, all bets are off. That pale white oak suddenly turns amber. Maple goes from clean and creamy to yellow and orange. And before you know it, the modern natural look you're going for starts looking a little bit more dated. So today, we're going to look at a series of common finishes and look at how they impact lighter colored woods. And be sure to stick around to the end because I've got a bonus finish that is hundreds of years old and you probably never heard of it before. The Wood Whisperer is sponsored by Woodcraft. Just get started. So why do finishes change the color of wood in the first place? Well, we can get a clue by looking at the finish itself. I've got a nice variety of finishes here, and I've added some of each to some test tubes so that we can get a good look at their color. When you see them side by side like this, the color differences are pretty dramatic. Now the colors that we see here aren't always one-to-one for how they're going to look on the wood, but at least it gives us a rough idea of what we can expect. If the color of the finish itself is amber, you can usually expect that the wood will turn amber too. And anything that starts out a milky white is a lot less likely to impart an amber hue. So let me hit you with a couple of broad general rules. Number one, oil finishes bring a strong amber color. You can see that these classic oil finishes like boiled linseed oil, tung oil, and armor seal, which is an oil-based varnish, they all have a very strong amber color. Oils tend to soak deep into the wood fibers, and it really changes the way that light reflects off the surface and how our eyes interpret that information. It increases the depth and the richness of the surface. Now, the other thing to think about is the effect of time. Many of these oils and oil-based finishes will get darker and more yellow or amber with time. So even if you like the way it looks today, you may not be quite as happy with it 10 years from now. General rule number two is that water-based finishes don't usually add much amber at all. So if you take nothing else from this video, if you stick with a water-based finish, there's a real good chance you're going to be in the ballpark of the finish you're looking for if you want that natural sort of untouched appearance. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rules. For instance, you can actually take oil finishes and do something to them that makes them not amber quite so much. Modern hardwax oils are often made in pigmented varieties, including some that are white, like these variants from Natural One Coat. The clear version of Natura does have that classic amber color, but these other varieties clearly have some white pigment in there, and you might think that it would behave like paint, but in reality, when mixed with the oil, just kind of cancels out the ambering effect. And all of these varieties produce slightly different results, so it'll be interesting to see how they look on the test boards. And just like oils can sort of tone down the ambering, on the other side, we have water-based finishes that have additives in them that create a little bit more ambering, something like General Finishes and Durovar. The reality is many water-based finishes just look kind of lifeless, especially on darker woods. So additives that warm up the finish give you the best of both worlds if you really want to use something that's water-based. And look, I get how confusing this can be, but these finish companies, they want to sell cans of finish, so they want to be everything to everybody, which means they have a lot of different varieties. So that's why I'm here, to kind of give you guys the information you might need to arm you with the knowledge that you can make the right decisions. All right, so with that in mind, let's make some test boards. So the test is going to be rather simple. I'm just going to coat some white oak and maple with each of our finishes. By no means is this an exhaustive array of finishes though. All I'm really trying to do is make sure that we have representatives from all the major categories as opposed to including every single brand out there. And this is pretty much just what I had on hand for testing. Now keep in mind that there are other things that can impact the color that we see when we look at a finished piece, including the board itself. There are always natural variations from board to board, and even different parts of the same board. And sanding also plays a role. Sand to a higher grit, and you tend to reject more finish. Sand to a lower grit, and you tend to get more intense color. And of course, the number of coats can impact color too. But all those things, especially when we're aiming for a lighter color, probably don't amount to something that we really need to worry about here. It's usually more of a factor when we're talking about darker colors and stains. but it's something to be aware of. All right, so let's take a look at the results. Now keep in mind, when it comes to color, the lighting in my shop, the white balance of my camera, the colors on your screen, all of these impact the color that you see. That's why the unfinished control board is so important, since you really want to know how things change from that reference point. So let me see if I could draw some conclusions here and make a few recommendations. Man, I could not be happier with the way these test boards came out. We've got a really good visibility on the areas with finish, and then of course the raw wood surrounding it. So let's take it section by section with related finishes. These first three are oil-based finishes. Now the first two are pure oils. We have boiled linseed oil, and then we have tung oil. They're going to look very, very similar. To my eye, I mean, on the white oak, it looks like the tung oil is a little bit darker, and on the maple, they look the same to me. But ultimately, in woodworking, we tend to say that boiled linseed oil is going to darken a little bit more with time. So even if they look the same right now, as time goes on, the boiled linseed oil should get a little bit darker, a little bit yellower over time, right? But it's also a lot more inexpensive. When we go over to this third panel, we have Armor Seal. Now, Armor Seal is basically a wiping varnish. That's if you took some of this oil, you heat it up, you add some resin and a little bit of thinner, that's where you get something that builds a finish on the surface. And you can see it doesn't penetrate as deeply. It doesn't need to. It's going to provide protection on the surface. And the color is a lot less dramatic there, but it is also an oil-based finish. And compared to the raw, certainly does change the color on both the maple and the white oak. So now our next two, we're looking at water-based finishes, and you can see right away, dramatic difference from the oil-based finishes over here. We've got just the simple Minwax polyacrylic, but any acrylic water-based finish would probably perform very similar to this. And just to have a second data point, I threw in Total Boat's Halcyon, which is an exterior finish, but it is also water-based. And you can see on the white oak, kind of a significant difference there. The Halcyon is a little bit lighter, a little bit more natural, and it looks like we got a little bit more warmth here from the polyacrylic on the white oak. I can't really see a big difference on the maple. I mean, maybe with additional coats we might see some more. There are 2 coats on there, by the way, but not a substantial difference. But when you compare this class of finishes to this class of finishes, big difference. All right, so the next 2 finishes are what we're calling evaporative finishes. We have lacquer, which has lacquer thinner in it, and shellac, which has alcohol in it. And once the alcohol and the lacquer thinner sort of evaporate, that's when the curing process begins. So you could build these finishes very quickly. They dry pretty fast. And you know, I honestly don't see a huge difference between either one of these. They both warm up the board significantly more than the water-based. They kind of both look very similar to our Armor Seal over here. And I don't see a whole lot of difference to speak of there in the maple. Same results. Now these last 4 are where I think things get really interesting because we're talking about hardwax oils. Now my preferred brand is Natura One Coat, but there are other brands on the market that do similar things. And we're looking here at the clear version. This is the stock stuff that I use on just about every project. And you could see, definitely warms up the maple and it warms up the white oak quite nicely. So if you don't like that and you want to take some of that away, this next panel is the natural mist. So it adds a little bit of pigment, kind of like a grayish colored pigment, but you can see it's a little muted compared to the orange, you know, extra life that you find in this panel here. It's just taking it toned down just a little bit. When we move over further, now we start getting some of the white pigment in there. So yeah, we have still darkened the material, but you can actually look really closely, especially in the white oak with those open pores. You could see that white pigment going into the pores. This starts to not only mute the amber, it starts to bring in a color effect on certain species like white oak that some people really like. They want to see that effect of the white being in the grain like that. Now, it doesn't really happen on maple because we have more of a closed, smooth grain structure, so there's no place for that pigment to go. When you go all the way to the 4th one, this is what they call their soft white color, and it's very significant. You can see exactly what's going on here. It is almost like a diluted paint on the surface and sort of a whitewash on the surface, and on the maple, same sort of thing. This is not a good or bad situation. This is simply what you prefer and what kind of effect you're going for. All right, so now when we look at a broad overview, we can see everything all at once. It does seem pretty clear that the water-based finishes are going to get us the closest to that muted, natural, matte-looking finish. Anytime you involve an oil, you bring that ambering color. And even when you have oils that start to bring in pigments to kind of cancel out that color, the color is a little bit more noticeable than it is with the water-based finish. So I do think, at least with this selection of finishes that we have here, the water-based will be the winner on something like this. Now, this is just what I can see. You guys may agree with me, but I want one more set of eyeballs on this, and I'm going to bring my wife, Nicole, in here to see what she thinks. Well, before I let Nicole invade my shop, I wanted to let you guys know about a huge Father's Day sale we're having in the Wood Whisperer Guild. For a limited time, you can get 40% off any course, excluding current pre-orders. These are full project and technique-based courses taught by world-class woodworkers with the kind of detail you just don't get when you're bouncing around with the YouTube algorithm. So if you're ready to stop searching and start building, the Guild is where you can go to become a better woodworker. Use code DADDY40 at checkout and take 40% off your next course at thewoodwhispererguild.com. Basically, this is white oak and maple, and I did a whole bunch of finishes. I want to know two things.
How it feels?
Nope, okay. That is not one of the things. Thanks, though.
Okay.
I want to know two things. I want to know, which one do you like the best if this were your floor, let's say?
Oh, this is okay.
Or a piece of furniture. And then, you know how like people don't want to see dark colors, they want to see muted colors that almost look as natural as possible?
Sure.
That's a thing now.
Okay.
I'm telling you it's a thing.
Okay.
So now you know. So I want two answers. Again, this is maple, this is white oak. Looking at both of these boards, pick the finish that you think looks the most natural and muted. If someone was asking you for your opinion, which one looks like almost like there's no finish on it?
Right, so I want to get as close to the board.
Yeah, this is the natural around the perimeter. So which one looks the most natural?
That one. This one.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe
And
that one. No, that's too dark. That one.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe that would be your number two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I like that one. Maybe that one. It's
Okay.
number two.
Okay, so these two you
Yeah,
like.
those
All right.
two.
All right, so what about on the white oak?
Well, that one is the closest to the wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. But just out of my curiosity, which one do you like the best for you?
What I would like to see on my floor?
Yeah.
That one, this one,
Okay.
and this one.
Okay. So you picked
This one?
natural one coat
Oh,
on the maple, and you picked shellac on the white
Yeah.
oak. Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
You already picked. Don't second
okay.
guess now.
I won't second guess myself.
You like the water-based finishes is what that comes down to.
Oh, okay. Well, no. You said which. I didn't say I liked them.
The ones you picked that are relevant to this video
Yes.
are the water-based finishes. I asked what you like because I was curious.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. She seems to agree with me. Now, keep in mind, this isn't a good or bad thing. This is simply having tools in your toolbox to achieve the effect that you or a client wants, right? And it's important to know how all these finishes behave so that you can do that. Because in this instance, it's not just as simple as, oh, water-based finishes, hands down, that's what I'm gonna do. Well, what if you don't have a whole lot of experience with water-based finish and you don't have the skill set to apply it? You probably should practice first, but if you're putting this on a big piece of furniture, it's actually a little bit more skill involved in applying a water-based finish compared to something like a hardwax oil. So maybe if you don't have the finishing skill set, you might be looking at some of these hardwax oil options to get as close as you can, just because they're so much easier to apply and much more forgiving, right? So there's a whole decision-making matrix, but the big point is you should know what these finishes do so that you know how they're going to behave on the surface when you apply it to your, I guess, floor, or in my case, a piece of furniture. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. This is a whole lot of fun. A lot of times my test boards, I wind up throwing them away when I'm done. I think these are keepers. These look kind of fun and it's a good reference tool. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Whoa, I almost forgot. I told you guys there would be a whole other finish that you probably never heard of before. Well, let me show you a Danish soap finish. I first saw a soap finish in use by one of our guild instructors, Caleb James, in his dry bar cube course. It's a traditional Scandinavian technique that literally uses fragrance-free natural soap flakes and water to provide a silky smooth, natural-looking, non-toxic finish. It's also incredibly easy to renew when needed. Now, there are different methods for applying this stuff, either a more diluted solution or something like what you see here as a paste. Now, I'm not sure I'll be using this finish anytime soon on my own furniture, but it's pretty darn cool. Right now, if I can just give this one last interpretation, when I look at the soap finish, it's kind of interesting. It's dramatically darker, but it isn't amber. It isn't yellow. It isn't what we get when we have our oils over here. I would say it's probably closer to somewhere in our water-based family or in this particular Natura one coat, the Natural Mist color. It's the one that's kind of just brings out the grays and the browns in the white oak as opposed to pushing us into that amber color family. But yeah, so finish, hundreds of years old, very cool. Maybe not the most durable, but it's a choice. I'm okay. Pick a finish that you like. No, let's do it the other way, right?
I don't like?
No. That's what you call a hook. Hook on them, taught them, hook on them. That might have been a little bit much.